Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Bearded Talk podcast, the podcast whose goals is to take your dream to a reality and to take your business sustainable and help achieve your business and life goals. Here we go. Guys, this episode is a little bit special for me, and I don't think I'll get worked up or anything, choked up, if you will, about this. But the guy we're having on today, his name is Tony Hoffer, and him and his wife, so-called the Hoffers, I knew about Tony and Amy's work before I was a photographer. And Tony's work, when I became a photographer shortly thereafter, Tony's work was the first photography, if you will, that I saw, and basically told me that it would be okay to shoot weddings, and that you could still take cool photos at weddings, and customers could still love you, and you could still create a sustainable business doing that. Before then, I had never seen a cool wedding image. I had never thought that wedding photography was cool by any means, or that there were any benefits to it. But after seeing the Hoffer's images, I was changed. And so he's been an inspiration since the beginning, since I started. And I've read almost every blog and watched everything he posts, like many people that stalk the Hoffers. And I'm just so grateful that he agreed to come on the podcast today. So without further ado, here's my interview with Tony Hoffer. Enjoy everything he says. Thanks. Hey, Tony, how's it going, man?
It's great. How are you?
Doing well, man. Just starting off 2017, and you guys been busy?
We have been moderately busy. I would say it's kind of a normal winter. We have weddings sometimes, but not much during the week, so it's nice to sleep in.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. How was your 2016, at least business-wise?
Business-wise, it was good, but a little different, I would say. We had some kind of interesting situations. One of our associate photographers went to Asia for 11 weeks and in the middle of wedding season. So that was a little different, getting used to that. And then I had a pretty bad back injury at the beginning of the year that was pretty nasty. So it was a very interesting year, but photography-wise, it was pretty good. Can't complain about anything.
That is crazy. I didn't know that one of the associates left for so long, and then I feel like your backstory is like almost every other week I hear somebody talking about it, and they're like, "Hey, did you see this photo of Tony on his back?" And it's just like, yeah, you can still run a business. You just have to make sure you communicate with clients, and we'll probably get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, you need a laptop for sure.
Yeah, that is awesome. So I wanted to bring you on today just because everybody knows that I've admired you, and I think you have a lot of valuable stuff to say. And the number one trait that I've enjoyed about you is that you don't you're not afraid to say it like it is. You're not afraid to say, hey, I've heard stories from workshops where, hey, this particular piece of work is not that good and should not be in your portfolio, or talking about, I've heard reviews too, where you've talked about slow growth and, hey, try not to start your business in 6 months, think long term. And so the number one thing about your business that I feel like I love and enjoy is the demand. And I heard you speak about it a few weeks ago here in DC. And I just want to hear kind of how you started, where you're originally from, and then what's that process been to where you guys are at now, and what does demand look like, quote unquote, demand look like over the past, I guess 8 or 10 years for you?
All right. This is a long answer.
That was a loaded question. Sorry.
No, it's cool. We started in 2007, so this is our 10th year that we're starting now. Just kind of one of those things that started by mistake and kind of grew by mistake. And, within a year, I was doing it full time, about a year. And within another year and a half, my wife Amy was doing it full time with me. And then around like 2012, we started with associate photographers. And by 2014, we had two associate photographers and one full-time studio manager. And that's kind of where we are now. It's January 12th. Tomorrow we are actually announcing that we have another associate photographer that's joining us. So we're going to have three by the time that this airs, I would imagine. And yeah, so that's kind of like a very brief overlook of our business. As far as demand goes, it sort of built up really quickly. Like I mentioned, went from like no weddings to 35 basically, like less than, well, I guess about a year after that. And Amy and I have shot about that ever since, somewhere between like 35 and 40 weddings. And somewhere along the line, I think it was maybe like 2009, 2010, business really, really picked up super quickly, and we were getting like lots and lots of requests, which was great, and that's kind of why we eventually expanded. So that's kind of was the start of the sort of high demand season of our business, I would say. And then over time, as we've sort of learned how to spread out the work and to raise our prices appropriately and things like that, the demand has, I would say, still stayed high, but it's not in the like insane, we're severely underpriced mode that it once was, which is probably healthy for our business, I think.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the severely underpriced and crazy time?
Sure. Yeah, I don't remember what the prices were or anything at the time, but when the first time we ever started teaching workshops, I think it was like 2010 or 2011. I decided it might be a good idea leading up to it to start tracking like where our business was coming from and things like that, because I had never really thought about it too much before. And so I started, every time we got an inquiry, I would just fill out this little form with where it came from. I would actually give the inquiry a score from 1 to 5 of like how good of an inquiry it was, and just count them basically. And so that first year, I think it was somewhere in 2010 or 11, we had 1,400 inquiries, and at the time it was just Amy and I shooting, so we were doing 35 weddings. So if you do the math on that, I think it's like, like only like 2% of our inquiries could we even say yes, we are available to. And so it was obviously a good problem to have, but it wasn't, we weren't really smart enough to know how to deal with it properly at the time.
Sure. I feel like if I ever got to 1,400 inquires, which unfortunately I'm not there yet, I would get that like tattooed on my neck or something and just be like, all right, like badge of honor, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, they're not all good. They wouldn't all book you, that kind of thing. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know, I mean, I knew that was obviously good, but I don't think at the time I didn't understand sort of how to handle that or what to do about it, or what that meant for where we were. So
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's something that's super common, at least in the photography industry, and hopefully I feel like podcasts and workshops are trying to help out. But just kind of off the cuff, could you tell me a little bit more about like just to kind of help people in their new businesses? Like, I understand why it's kind of unwise to only be accepting a certain percentage of your inquiries, but talk a little bit more about, you weren't sure if you were doing the right thing at the time, or, kind of like the imbalance that was there, taking 35, but getting, a bunch of inquiries.
right. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different answers to that. One is that we only do 35 weddings because that's all we can actually handle for Amy and I. But I think the other thing is it actually taught me a couple really cool lessons about sort of understanding supply and demand. But not only that, is understanding it from a business perspective or a branding perspective of why it's really valuable to be in demand. Where the client almost feels like they need you more than you need them, which I don't think that's ever true, but it's a very valuable branding position to be in. And so I learned a lot about that. So even as we've grown, I would actually kind of push back on you a little bit in saying like we're trying to book as many weddings as we can, because I don't necessarily think that's true, because we probably could have either more associate photographers or find associate photographers who wanted to do this, to do 40 or 50 weddings a year, which is not the situation we have now. And that's partly because of the things I learned then, which is that, sort of not being selective, but being in demand is a really valuable place for a business to be. And so we try to sort of maintain that even as we've grown.
Definitely. Yeah. And I definitely, mostly just meant in the good way that you guys can take on more and serve more greater clients, having through those associates. I definitely know that there's a kind of a selective process, and you guys aren't the best fit for some couples, and that's kind of the best way to do it. So you were doing a full-time job when you first started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know kind of like, maybe you did this, or maybe you could give advice to that, like what was the best time you think to make that transition from having two full-time jobs essentially to doing the photography?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have to say it was probably easier than for some people, because the job I had didn't really pay very well, and so it was, once, like the first year, I was like, oh, cool, this is extra income, and then by the second year, it's like, oh, I'm going to be making a lot more than I am in my day job, so I just can't do my day job anymore. So it was really pretty easy, and I mean, the other thing was, even though I didn't expect it to happen that quickly, I went from, working a 40-hour-a-week job to, probably working 50 or 60 hours on the business also. So I had quite a few, like, 100-hour work weeks or something crazy like that, which is just like, I mean, it's just wake up, work until you sleep for 7 days a week, which that'll make you evaluate your life really quickly.
Yeah, I bet you and Amy had some fun conversations back then.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we
hey,
didn't see each other a lot for a while.
what would you say, could you give a practical tip to somebody? Is it just financial, or is it kind of, I always talk to people who are, like, I call it overlapping. They're doing a full-time job and trying to pursue their passion. Is there another practical thing to think about during that time, other than not just the financial, but maybe it's like work-life balance or...
Yeah, I mean, I think the financial thing is definitely like probably the biggest factor, but yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is just, I know I have a friend who's sort of wrestling with this right now, if he should pursue it full time, and you also have to think about sort of the longevity of it. Is this something you want to do for 10, 15 years? Is it something you just want to do for a few years? Because I know some people kind of get burned out on it. But also just like, does it fit the lifestyle? I know a lot of people who have left photography because they get kids, and for the first couple of years it might be okay, but then the kids start playing sports on nights and weekends, and that's kind of where we need to be available. And so I think just like from a lifestyle perspective, that's kind of worth thinking about, because a lot of people see it. Even when they're doing it part-time, they sort of see it as this very flexible job where you just need to be available on Saturdays. But I think the longer we've done this, although it is very flexible in some ways, it's also not always flexible. We have, I think Amy and I were saying, I think between September and October, we only had 3 evenings where we were actually in our house, because we had engagement shoots, or we had meetings, or just other random things that were sort of related to the business, or just obviously personal life stuff too. So if we were in a different life situation, it would be challenging in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I think people don't understand too. It's not just kind of like you said, like one day a week. And then on the good side, on the positive side of it, it's like a positive, but with an asterisk. You're like, hey, like Monday through Wednesday, we can hang out and do whatever, or like you kind of have your like peaceful time of the week, hopefully, but it's carved out in a different spot than maybe the general public, if you will, or like your friends.
Yeah, yeah. I try to tell everyone, like basically my 9 to 5 is completely flexible. Like I might have a lot of work to do, but I can totally push it off and do it at midnight if I want to. I can do whatever. So I have some friends that are either self-employed or free during the day or something. So I can go play tennis or go to the gym or do whatever I want during the 9 to 5, which is awesome. But there are like, evenings and weekends where it is like the least flexible job you've ever heard of because it's like you just can't miss things. So it's definitely some give and take, but it works for us. We really love it. So
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about having the kind of that open 9 to 5, other than tennis and other things like that? Like maybe what's something funny that you would have never gotten to do during 9 to 5? Maybe
sleep. we were. I was just telling somebody the other day we had to set an alarm. We had a commercial shoot this week that we had to wake up at like I don't know 6:30 or 7 or something. And every time I set an alarm, I get really confused because I'm not used to that sound of something waking me up in the morning. And so that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, most of the time we can just go to bed and wake up when we want, which is awesome.
that is so funny. I can't stop laughing. I think I saw, probably during your busy season, like you'll have to do a few sunrise sessions. I know there's some seasons here in DC where you have to do sunrise just to avoid tourists. And you said something about setting the alarm. And is that kind of your normal workflow? Because are you guys night owls?
Yeah, I think so. I've become more of one. I think one cool thing for us has been some of the stuff, like some of the office stuff that's a little more timely. Our studio manager Lindsay handles now, and so for me, like my big responsibilities obviously are shooting, culling, blogging, that kind of stuff, but it's not quite as time dependent. So where I used to have to wake up and sort of schedule my day, now I'm a little more flexible because I'm not handling as much of the office stuff. So that's been kind of part of that transition. So I think I've become more of a night owl because of it.
That's awesome. Would you be up for kind of talking about maybe some of the challenges? Everybody sees adding a studio manager on and they're like, oh man, this is this magical green grass. And I know Lindsay's been amazing for you guys, but what are kind of maybe some of the fears and some of the challenges that come with hiring an additional employee like that?
Well, Lindsay's here, so I can't bad talk her too loudly. I'm just kidding. Um, no, it's not really downsides. It's just, before we hired anyone, everyone I know that owns a business told me the same thing, which is as soon as you start hiring people, you become as much a people manager as you do whatever else you do for your business. And I think we've done a really good job, not to like compliment ourselves, but I'm really happy with everyone that we've had and have as part of our team. So we don't really have any like personnel concerns, but even like with that, you become like an authority figure in some ways, even if you don't try it. So that is true. I've spent a lot more time sort of people managing. The best way of describing it is, and I've only realized this over the past few years, it's like if I want to change something about my business, like if we decide, okay, we want to start charging for travel, let's say over 50 miles instead of over 100 miles or something like that, just something so little that you used to be able to just go change one PDF and it was done. Now you run it by everyone to make sure that works for everyone, and then you have to fill out like 4 different price lists, and like there's just a lot more involved every time you make a decision, which is not a good or a bad thing. In some ways, I think it's been great because you kind of get a second opinion on everything you're doing for your business, which is awesome. But in other ways, it's a little limiting because you're not the only person you're responsible for anymore.
Definitely. It's one of those situations kind of where like ultimately you guys can go further, but it's one of those things where they say if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with a group or something like that.
Yeah.
What else? Can you talk a little bit more about maybe like before you hired your first employee, Lindsay, or the editor or something like that? Maybe like how did you know you were ready to hire an employee, if you were at all? And then what did that look like practically? Like, are they a contractor, or have you maybe changed it up a few different times for different people?
Yeah, so the very first thing we ever did was we outsourced our editing, and um, I would say that was sort of a test case for the way we ended up doing it when we hired other people eventually. So when we outsourced the editing, I was very like reluctant to do it. I don't, maybe I don't know. That was maybe 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, and it was a lot less common then than it is now. And so we found a friend of ours who was kind of like interested in photography but wasn't really doing it and liked editing, and kind of asked her, hey, can we just kind of train you to do it the way we do it? And just kind of see how it goes. And it went great. She ended up getting a lot of other clients and had a little editing business for a while. And that's sort of, I would say that's sort of how we learned kind of how we wanted to do things, which was that we sort of want to insource instead of outsource, where we have everything kind of in-house, and that we want to find people that we just like as people and that fit kind of our that kind of fit our business ethics more than anything else, and then kind of worry about all the other details second, because we all have strengths and weaknesses, obviously, but for us, because of the way we've always gotten our business, which is like word of mouth and referrals, the way we're treating each other and the way we're treating our clients is way more important than whether or not someone is really good at keeping a calendar straight or something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Insource versus outsource. That's freaking awesome. How did you guys know, not to beat a dead horse, but we'll get off this really quickly. How did you guys know just financially? Did you guys save up a lot for that? Or you said, hey, we're going to, and this doesn't have to apply to any employee, but maybe just your decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean the when we decided to outsource the first time, it wasn't really a financial decision. It was, or I shouldn't even say outsource, but when we started, giving our editing to someone else, it wasn't really financial. We knew we were going to take a financial hit because it was just Amy and I, and so any money we spent was money that we could have kept. But it was really just a quality of life issue the first time around. Um, and then yeah, with the associates, basically the first time we ever hired one, his name was Chuck, and we were both mutually interested. And I just said, hey, this is how much we need to keep from each wedding that you would shoot. You tell me how much you would need to keep. And he told us, and we just added those two numbers together, and that's what we charged for his weddings. And we kind of did the same thing, once Chuck left with Fareed, and so we've sort of maintained that, just to try to be as fair as possible to both them and to us. And so that's kind of how that went. And then, it's just kind of doing math from there. And I've told people this in the past, and I'll say it again. I mean, our business, and especially our like associate program, we don't do it to make a lot of money. One of my friends, Ben, he runs a really good associate program and has for a long time. And when I asked him about it, he's like, look, I don't make a lot of money off this. I just do it because I want to give jobs to my friends, and I want to have a really good business that I could maybe grow a little bit more. And that was really, it kind of gave me the permission to do it the way I wanted to do it, which is the way we have it now. So, we're not like raking in money off of our associate program, but we have a little work family, and we make a little money off of it, and everyone's happy. So.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you guys enjoy what you guys are doing so much more fully now than maybe, not that you didn't enjoy it 5-6 years ago, but it feels like you guys are in the stride, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely more rewarding. It's really cool. Like on our website, when people go to our website and they want to ask about hiring us, they have the choice between if they can, if they just want to, just us to get back to them with who's available, or if they want a specific person. And that's been really cool because, a lot of people will say like, hey, if the primary photographer is not available, then we'll hand you off to an associate. And we've always been very intentional not to do it that way, so that people can choose whoever they want and be very clear about who they're getting. And so it's been super rewarding. Like I think it was the first like 2 or 3 months of 2016, it was almost like a third split of who people were requesting between Amy and I, Jim and Fareed. And that was like, it was kind of a hit to the ego in some ways, but it was also like amazing for us to see, for us to find out that people are really connecting with these other people inside our business, and to know that we were I don't know, doing something right. It was kind of fun to see.
Definitely. That's awesome. What do you guys, for you, and if this is getting into the, we'll call it the secret sauce, if you will, you could totally shut it down, but what are some of the specific ways, maybe in the past, and these might not even be things you do now, but maybe worked back then, specific ways that maybe you kind of helped build up demand or create that word of mouth environment so where it's very strong?
Yeah, it's fine. It's not a secret. I mean, if anything, I get this question a lot and the answer sounds vague, so people always, I think get frustrated with my answer. But all we've ever done, and I don't think we even knew we were doing this until we started to try to figure it out. But all we've ever done is just try to focus as much as we can on making the work better all the time and every year, and then focus as much as we can on our clients and what they would want, and making decisions kind of first based on what they would want, and second on what we would want. So I think that's pretty much been the root of almost everything. We've never done like paid advertising or worried about SEO or anything like that. It's not really important to us, because we've just found a lot more success in getting word of mouth referrals, because we generally get really good clients that way, and so we tend to just devote a lot of time and energy into that. So to give you maybe a more specific example, the first probably 5-7 years of our business, in all the packages that we offered, we didn't include, or I shouldn't say not all the packages, but the first couple packages we would offer for weddings, we didn't include digital files. We would only include, prints and albums and stuff like that, or people had to buy digital files separately. And then, after they spent a certain amount, they would get them. And we got to a point, maybe, I don't know, a couple of years ago, where it just felt like that was wrong of us to do. And I don't mean wrong, like unethical wrong. We were having clients who were having a hard time understanding that, more so than before. And we sort of realized that, in the day and age that we're living in, the tide has turned. And so our clients now sort of expect that as part of what they're getting. And so we changed that, and we took a bit of a hit financially because of it. And so we started, including those in everything, and stopped including some other things. And we eventually kind of sorted out how to still make money that way. But we did it because we felt like it was the right thing to do for our clients, first. And I think that stuff like that has been our mindset and has paid off, even if it doesn't pay off in like the average number of or average amount of money we're making per client. It pays off in the average amount of referrals we get from that client, which is a much more long-term strategy, if you ask me.
Definitely. I love that. Can you tell me a little bit more? I know you spoke about this a few weeks ago, but talk to me kind of even more about focus. So we'll just say, and I'm going to generalize here, but, Hoffer's focus is people and the work, and making those two things the best you can and treating those two things the best you can is like the main priority. How do you, again, like SEO or website or submissions and stuff like that, what is your kind of gauge for at what times do you care about those things? Because, you do have a website, right? So it's like,
right.
When do you take the time to kind of say, okay, hey, we need to turn the volume up on this a little bit and do that?
It's just, I mean, stuff like that, honestly, is just a total, like, it's an afterthought, like, 365 days a year. It's the only time we ever really submit to things. Like last year, there's like this big, what's it called? The shoot share contest or something. Which I never do contests or anything, but last year I just had a couple days where didn't have a whole lot going on, and so I entered it just for fun. I think that's the only contest I probably ever entered, or maybe not ever, but one of the few. And same thing with SEO. Like I have no idea what our Google rank is or something. I don't check our analytics anymore. But every once in a while, if I'm bored, I'll check it. But that's about it. It's really not something we think about.
I love that. That's awesome. There was like a hush in the room 2 or 3 weeks ago when you spoke, and You were just like, we don't care about these things, and it was awesome.
And I'm not saying that's right for everybody.
Right.
It's just right for us. We haven't, and I mean, we've been lucky. We haven't had to care about that stuff, and so, I shouldn't say necessarily lucky. I feel like part of it's luck, and I feel like part of it is intentional. We've chosen to use our time to focus on other things, and it's for us that works.
Definitely. No, I feel like that would be, like the front cover of your guys' business plan would be the work and the people. And when people ask about you guys or why I like your photography and why I like your business model and stuff like that, is I usually try and describe it as kind of like maybe that, and there aren't too many of these anymore, but maybe that like backcountry restaurant where you can only get like this amazing sandwich and it's so great and it's always packed, but they're not listed on Yelp or they're not listed on Google business rankings. Like nobody would find them unless somebody told you. And it's, the longer those guys last, like even the better. And the kind of the hype has been made so long term. I have a sandwich shop back home in Delaware that has been open for 35 years, and every day it's packed and the food is amazing. But if you go on Yelp, there's no listing or there's 1 star, because they only accept cash or something like that. But that's like part of the charm, and trying to explain that to people these days with like digital marketing and stuff like that is just like, hey, like if you focus on something that you're really good at, like we know lots of photographers that are all about just the customer experience more than even their photography. And they're just like, hey, client gifts, client experience, client emails, helping with this. And I think that when people start out, they want to kind of focus on everything. But you've learned, and I know others have learned, that if you can just kind of niche down and kind of, again, turn the volume up in 2 or 3 areas that really matter, like that's where you'll find success.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Someone mentioned that same thing to us. I think that's a really good example, the restaurant thing. We're doing a conference in London next year, or I guess this year. And they were asking us the other day for like a promo thing. They were like, when we bring up your name, people either have heard of you and like you or have no idea who you are. And I was like, that's actually kind of a compliment. I'd much rather have like, 1,000 people who really like our work and connect with us rather than 10,000 people who just know who we are and, kind of like us. It's just, I don't know, if it happens, great. And hopefully when it happens, those people stay connected to us and become cheerleaders for us. And that's kind of the goal, regardless of how many people it is. That doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Have you ever read Seth Godin's Tribes?
No, but I feel like I may have heard some of the ideas from there before.
Yeah. So if the idea is to essentially build, as many brand ambassadors as you can, and like 20% of the clientele will bring in 80% of the income. And that's what I feel like you have kind of mastered. Is I feel like every day I see a new client like tag you in a photo and they're like, oh, we love Tony Offers photos. And granted, like I know why, the photos are amazing, but I'm just like, man, they are so good at, creating people that are going to love you guys and kind of further the brand. And so I love that.
Yeah, thanks.
I kind of asked this a little bit more and you said sleep, but I want to maybe elaborate a little bit more. Is what do you love most about your career as a photographer, maybe now or as a whole?
I just really like doing different things. I love just kind of the ability to push ourselves, that I'm going to answer your question by telling you what I don't like about our career, which is when we shoot at the same venue like 3 times in a month, or like when we have a wedding where it just kind of feels generic, where there's like not a lot of unique personality or unique things like that. And both of those things are very rare for us. And I think they sort of exaggerate the point of what I'm trying to say. Like I'm just trying to give an example. So like last year we had a wedding in Vancouver, and we did it after shoot with the couple afterwards, and we just went out and just basically went hiking for a few hours, and then and before we did that, we took some portraits of him like riding his motorcycle around, just like random stuff. And like we have a wedding next week in Costa Rica, and they're just kind of like, hey, we have a 5 hour chunk of time. We have like no bridal party. Let's just go take photos somewhere. Like you guys just find it. And like, I mean, those are kind of exotic examples, but they're also like interesting to us because we can kind of make it whatever we want and explore new things and try stuff. And so that's the really exciting stuff for us. And so the more we get to do that, or the more like interesting people or new situations we find ourselves in, the better.
How have you guys kind of balanced that with uh, having, maybe like a lower price point for the East Coast? I remember Ryan Brennheiser said one time that he kept his prices low because he didn't want to have the same kind of client all the time. What do you kind of think about that? Because not every couple can fly you to Vancouver, but it doesn't mean that a couple that's local isn't awesome. Just kind of how do you find the greatness in the generic as well, if you will?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I remember Ryan saying that, and I think it's a good point. I think both he and we are probably, when I look back at our old work, it's there's a lot more examples of just weird stuff that happened that is fun. It's not weird in a bad way, but weird just like unique. Like people decided they wanted to have a puppet show at the reception or something like that, which doesn't we don't really get much of that anymore. And that's not to say I think he's right that the higher you go, the sort of more uniform things can become, and so that's definitely a balancing act. But for us, it's not necessarily about kind of booking crazy weddings, although I'm sure everyone would like that. It's also just about sort of finding unique people and finding the unique things about them, or just personalities and stuff like that. So I mean, it's not, it's not even, it doesn't have to be traveling. It doesn't have to be puppet shows or anything like that. But, what makes a day great for us really is just like having really smiley people, or, having people who are just kind of like, you know what, just do your thing. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. You do this well. Just, have fun with it. That's just as rewarding for us as anything else.
I love that. That's awesome, man. So, dude, I'll take it out of the kind of the deep philosophical photography questions for a while, and just ask you a little bit of fun ones that some folks had. Have you ever taken any photography workshops or classes, in your career, maybe before?
No, I don't learn. I don't learn well that way. I'm an experiential learner, and one of the reasons we've built our workshops the way we have is for other experiential learners, because most of the workshops I've been interested in are just kind of like, hey, you sit there and watch me do what I do, and I don't learn well that way, and so we don't teach that way either. But no, I mean, I've done this for years. I should say we've done this for years. Is sort of teaching ourselves through our own through our own like personal workshops for ourselves, if that makes any sense. So like we'll basically set up a shoot or set up something where it's like, hey, we're going to only work on this one thing and coordinate it just so we can get better at it and use it in our paid work. And so we've done that a lot over the years, but no, never actually gone to learn from somebody else.
That's awesome. And then last one is just like a fun softball one is, what gear are you guys shooting on? And maybe like, what's your favorite piece of gear right now?
So we have about 2 years ago we switched to Nikon stuff, and so we have Nikon D750s, which are fine, whatever. We have a ton of Nikon lenses. I really like the 58 1.4. That is kind of high on my list right now. Yeah, and then for flashes, we're actually using all Cheetah stuff now. So we have the Cheetah speed lights, we have the Cheetah strobes, and so we kind of use them interchangeably. And then I also have one of those Young Nuo or whatever that brand is called, ice lights, which is like a a color changing LED panel thing. So I really like that a lot now too. I would say that, or just I have like a strip box that I put on a strobe. We use that a lot for portraits. I would say one of those two things are my kind of favorite tools right now. I don't get as excited about cameras and lenses anymore. I kind of get more excited about things that I can do with lighting gear and just kind of messing around with that stuff.
Definitely. It seems like, especially with the kind of the cheetah system, especially for you guys, it was less about, pun intended, flashy or, cool gear, but more about, just making your job easier to be more creative, at the end of the day. It seems like that.
Yeah, yeah. The longer we've done this, the less flash we've used, to be honest. I think the more we've learned about light and understanding light, the less we've needed flash in as many situations. But with that said, when we are using flash, I think we found ourselves, especially over the last couple of years, is trying to make it more subtle and less flashy, which is probably why we've gone more to strobes and that kind of thing, and why we like the Cheetah system is because it's all sort of integrated, so we can quickly swap from natural light to a speed light to a strobe or something like that, or mix any combination of them. And so that's been really fun for us to kind of to do that, and also have very lightweight and long-lasting batteries, because then we don't have to worry about it very often.
Yeah, definitely. One last practical question. What business advice would you kind of give to photographers or just any business person starting out, maybe first 6 months to a year? Maybe they still have a full-time job, or maybe they're kind of stay at home, or they're able to take it on.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I would tell people is to practice. One of like my biggest pet peeves about photography now, and I mean, I don't think I'm old. I still think we're kind of new to the business still, but it's changed a lot from the time that we started to now. Whereas now everyone expects answers to be found online, and it's really kind of disappointing, because the most beneficial things I ever did, especially when we were starting, was, I'd see a photo that I really liked, and I would go home and I'd try to take the same one, and I would just play and play and play and try to figure it out. And now people write a message and be like, "Hey, what were your settings?" or what was your, they just try to get the answer and think that that's going to translate to their work on, like, when they go out to a wedding, that they'll just be able to remember it and do it. And that's not really how it works. You have to practice things, and you have to sort of commit them to memory, so that when you're in a bind or when time is short, you can pull those things out easily, because you actually know how to do them, and you sort of have the memory to remember to do them. And so I try to keep that in mind for ourselves even now. But I think that's a big piece of advice I would give to people is, don't ever ask anyone how they did something. Just try to do it yourself and see if you can figure it out, because you'll learn a lot more that way.
Definitely. And it's like, even if you do tell them, I grew up playing guitar, and it's like, what if you asked, Jimi Hendrix or Angus Young or, somebody like that, you said, "Hey, how did you play that?" And they play it, and you're like, it's kind of like, it's going to take time, and you actually making, an effort to kind of become one with your camera, the same way that somebody would be one with their guitar.
Yeah, and it takes experience to be able to sort of confidently bring something out. That's one of the reasons I was saying we sort of do our own, like, self workshops, where, like, some of them were like, okay, we're only going to shoot with, like, some sort of motion for, like, the next 3 hours. We're going to go out and just practice that. Well, the whole next year I was a lot better at shooting that way, because I was able to sort of practice it and get these techniques down, so that I didn't have to sit there in front of a client for 10 minutes to figure out how to do something. I just knew how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking silly in front of clients is like my least favorite thing.
Yeah, well, we can't help that. That happens. That's just our natural look. But that's okay.
That's funny. But you definitely, like, want to look like you're knowing what you're doing, I suppose. Awesome. Anyway, man, thanks so much for being on here. Where's the best place that people can connect with you and maybe see your work and hear what else you have to say?
Yeah, everything's on our site, hofferphotography.com. It's HOFFER. We have some commercial work that's linked on there. So those are kind of our two places online. And then all of our social media stuff is just Hoffer Photography. Yeah, and then we have a couple things coming up. I know mostly photographers will be listening to this. So if you like our stuff, you can hear us speak in the UK later this year. We will most likely be organizing another workshop soon, so you can jump on our mailing list for that. We don't do them very often, and they usually sell out pretty quick. So the mailing list is a good way to go if you're interested in something like that.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for being on the show. Hopefully we'll have you guys on again, and maybe we can include Amy next time.
Yes, would love to.
Man, so good. Let me know what you guys thought. thebeardedtalk@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. And lastly, I need a favor. Last week's episode was very personal and I think super valuable for anybody who's running a business. Please go listen to it and let me know what you think. Email me your thoughts. What are you struggling with? I need you to do that. I want that as a favor. Please, please, please go listen to episode 11. Thanks so much. Have a great day.